Hi. Today I thought I could talk about some of the energetic themes I've been feeling a little bit during this month so far. It's 11/11, the 11/11 portal. I won't be posting this on 11/11. Typically takes me a week or two to actually post the video, but um yeah, I thought I could just talk about some of the themes I've been feeling for November and also maybe just talk about um, some other good things to be aware of, just as we're moving through our life. And the first thing that was kind of coming to me, and I think it's a kind of a theme in Chicago, winter is officially it's come. It started. There's snow on the ground. We got like 6 inches yesterday, like overnight between Sunday and Monday. It's Tuesday on the day of this video. And something I've been kind of feeling with the snowfall is like a call to slow down. And I think oftentimes as we move into winter and even feeling a call to slow down, I think there can be a tendency to go, oh, this must mean I'm meant to hibernate. And I feel like sometimes that can be a little bit of a trap. And recognizing just because we're slowing down doesn't mean it's actually means that I'm stop moving. And I think oftentimes one of the reasons why we might experience seasonal depression is we're actually just not moving enough in the colder seasons, right? Depression is always fed by stagnancy. And so when we are going into a season where it's calling us to slow down, but we're being overly stagnant, is when we start to feel stuck, depressed, or life doesn't have a lot of meaning and it's just we're not moving forward enough. And so for me, like the message I kind of got around slowing down is last week, sometimes when I do like breath work and then I'll imagine myself dissolve into the void afterwards, sometimes I get visions. And the vision I got last week was like of a tarantula, like moving or walking. And when you think about a tarantula, how it moves or walk, it's like incredibly slow, but also mindful. And it kind of saves its energy for maybe when it sees something it wants. Like for a tarantula, that would probably be some type of prey. Um, for then a quick burst. But I think that's really a call for November is it's not time to slow down and stop all the things we're working towards, but just to move a little bit more mindfully and intentionally as we continue to create what we want to create. And for me, how I've been applying this to my life is like, okay, if I'm going to move a little bit slower, right? As you slow down, you start to see a little bit more of the full picture of your life. And for me, with this YouTube channel, I've been spending a lot of time working on this YouTube channel over the last couple of months and posting videos really regularly and posting shorts. And I've been neglecting like other areas of my life, like keeping my apartment always the cleanest or working out. And I think for me, when I think about how to apply slowing down in my life, it's still making YouTube videos, still being productive and efficient in my day, but addressing some of the areas I've been spending less time in, like keeping my apartment a little bit more clean and making sure I take time to work out. And I also think, I kind of talked in 2 videos ago about harmonic resonance and about trying to grow in areas that we might be weaker in. And I think as we slow down, right, I think the real call would be as I'm moving more mindfully and intentionally and I'm moving at a little bit of a slower pace, can I start to grow in the areas that feel uncomfortable to grow in? Like if I have a tendency to have a hard time keeping my apartment clean, when it feels hard to clean my apartment, maybe that's when I clean my apartment. When it feels hard, when I don't want to pick up my instrument and play my guitar or do some type of art, and it feels hard, and instead of doing old patterns or instead of doing something that I typically do all the time, right? Maybe I make a little bit more time to actually play my instrument. And especially when it feels hard to do that, right? Maybe we have a pattern of there's like we have 30 minutes left before we go to bed, and maybe typically we spend that scrolling on social media, and maybe instead of doing that for this month, maybe I try a little bit harder to pick up my guitar for those last 30 minutes before I go to bed and just play a song or two, right? And working on, can I look at the areas of my life as I'm moving slower that I'm either been neglecting or I feel like it's hard to act on sometimes, and can I act on that a little bit more often? Because I think that's really like, I think this month we're in is a call about being grounded. And when you're thinking about groundedness is well-rounded growth. Like if you, I said this in another video, but if you broke up the word G and round and flipped them, you then you get and put the word well before round, you get well-rounded growth. And and so I think, energetically, we're going through a little bit of a clearing process. And when we are addressing more of the full picture of our life rather than just being tenacious and getting after the one goal, but neglecting a lot of areas of our life, right? Sometimes there's time for that. And sometimes, depending on what's happening in the world and depending what the energy of the month is going to be like and how much space we might have in our life, it might be better to kind of focus on a little bit more of the full picture. And it might mean we're a little bit less productive in the one goal we really want to achieve, but sometimes slow is actually fast. And sometimes finding harmony and balance actually helps us be our most efficient and productive when we do go to work on the goal we really want in our life. And I think that's, I kind of feel like this month is what I've heard other people channel, and what I've also felt in my body is this month is kind of a big clearing month. And when we can address a little bit more of the full picture of our life, um, it actually helps us move through those clearings a little bit easier, and it helps us get rocked by the waves a little bit less and helps us feel more steady as we go through waves of change. And then when we actually go to do work on the things that we really want to create, we can find a more natural rhythm and flow because of how grounded we are. um, and that's something I've really learned from my spiritual practice is like I used to go through a big for a couple of years of just really hitting like listening to people that channel doing angel visualizations, and I probably would do like 3 to 6 hours a day. And six, I wasn't doing 6 hours every day, but some months it was like at least once or twice a week I was probably doing 6 hours, and I was pretty much at least hitting 3 hours a day. And while I felt really peaceful, I also realized it made me a little bit more emotionally reactive, because heaven or connecting to guides or angels or a meditation practice focused on stillness, um, is different than our normal state, and it's an altered state. And when we're over consuming that, it's like an over activation, and when you get overly activated you become reactive. And also when you over consume like any type of altered state, even if it's positive, right, even if it's something that like light is generally pretty light and okay for your body to receive, even when you're pushing it a little bit your body does pretty well. But if you're really overly pushing it day after day, it's actually just going to really dysregulate your nervous system, and you're going to might feel really peaceful on the inside, but you might have a really hard time being direct and focused in your day, and have a really hard time, um, uh, kind of being present even with others. And that's something I definitely experienced for those years that I was overly focused on visualization practice, over focused on praying practices, and I would touch into really altered states. But it's when you're over consuming something, like a lot of that is a waste anyways, and you'd be better off finding being a balanced human and doing a little light work every day, or like an hour of light work every day, than doing 3 hours or plus every day consistently. Because it's going to make like we're meant to be humans. We're meant to take our connection to spirit and bring it into our human life. And if we are having a hard time living our human life because of our practices to connect with spirit, right? Something's off, and something is and 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 then we're not really able to serve others or be present with others or serve our life, as well as if we just did a little bit less every day, grew at a little bit more of a more natural rhythm, and took it slower, because slow can be incredibly fast. And there's a tendency people have to try and give up their earth life for a spiritual practice, where they spend all day doing a spiritual practice, and they neglect their earth life, and then they can feel really unfulfilled or wonder why they're not, or feel really jealous when they see someone who has a really successful life. And that's a great indicator of, wow, I'm really not taking the action steps I need to be taking, and I'm actually using my spiritual practice as a form of avoidance. And we also can see this in ourselves, maybe when we go to a potluck and we're the person who's just constantly talking about spirituality with every person we talk to at that party, right? Because you're meant to be a human, and you're meant to have, even ascended masters had other interests than just spirituality, and they could relate to people on a human level, whether that's talking about something they saw on TikTok, whether that's talking about the music they're listening to or what they've been cooking lately, right? When we're constantly bringing up spirituality, it's usually like showing us that we have a little bit out of balance relationship with spirituality. And it's okay to talk about spirituality, but it shouldn't be the only thing we're talking to about people at the party, right? We're not trying to convert people. We're trying to be an embodiment of what we practice. And when you embody it, you actually don't really need to talk about it that much, because people would just start to notice that you behave a little different. Like, wow, you're way more loving, kind, and better at listening than most of the people I interact with. And you don't even have to bring up that you're spiritual, because it's just the presence that you are. And maybe then they become curious of, wow, how did you become so present? What made you such a good listener? And then you can say, well, I really focused on lengthening my attention span through doing meditation practice, or I've been really practicing listening to my body as I go through my yoga class, and it's helped me listen to others deeper, or whatever really created positive change for us. And I think when we're thinking about change, you have to think about change as like a wave. And for me, like, what I realized is, if I did 3 hours of visualizations, the next day I would feel like death. And that was still a time when I was working through a little bit more density. And so when I've done 3 hours of visualizations now, or when I've done it recently in the past, I haven't felt as like death as much. But recognizing that when you are really hyper focusing on the light, the wave must come back down, right? The higher the peak of the wave, the greater the crash. And recognizing, if we're really chasing high peaks in our life, whatever that is, whether that's whatever high peak of an altered state, whether that's through light, whether that's through substances, whether that's through sexual experiences, whatever we really chase after, the bigger the come up, the greater the crash down. And it's why it's really good to grow slowly and mindfully. And for my day to day life, what I've found is, like, typically a good cap for like one session. This doesn't mean like sometimes I'll like do an hour of visualizations, maybe I'll channel for an hour, I'll pray on as I'm riding the train, I'll pray for an hour. And so I do like 3 hours sometimes, but it's like different. And it also, there's spaces, and and I don't do that every day either. And I always am listening to my body of, wow, I'm feeling really lit up probably a good time to play my guitar, probably a good time to clean my apartment rather than to listen to another spiritual podcast. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, I feel fine today. Maybe I can push it a little further. And I absolutely still push my edges. I absolutely still work to expand through spiritual practice. And I still do probably a couple hours of spiritual practice like most days, all days, regularly. But I really have taken a note of, can I listen to my body, and can I listen to when my energetic container feels a little bit more full, and not overdo it so much, because I recognize if I do am overdoing it, right? The bigger the wave, the higher the crash. And when we're chasing altered states, it's going to push us into chasing under altered states unconsciously too, right? That's something I recognized. The only real, one of the few patterns I still have left in me that I have maybe a harder time not feeding is like technology, just like scrolling and stuff. And I've been pretty good about it lately, but that's something I definitely notice is when I overdo a light practice, when I do too much spirituality and I get a little ungrounded from that, I tend to have a real tendency to scroll on um, on social media, and recognizing that technology, looking at that for long periods of time, is an altered state in itself. And so what you start to see is, oh, when I overdo my self-care practice, when I overdo my visualization meditation practice, I'm then going to crave altered states on the negative side, as well as a way of, because when you're over consuming something, it's always coming from a place of avoidance, right? Oh, I don't want to face my life. So instead of trying to take, like, clean my apartment or take positive, or find greater balance in my life through playing some art or going to hang out with a friend, I'm just going to do 4 hours of visualizations today, right? It's a form of avoidance. And the ways that you feed that pattern of avoidance, then you will strengthen your pattern of avoidance in general, and then um, you'll start to fall into negative patterns of avoidance, whether that's using substances, pornography, maybe shopping, or an eating disorder, or whatever our past history of pain, whatever we were really addicted to, or used in a way to cope negatively, right? So over focusing on light can kind of swing us into the opposite direction. And even if it doesn't swing us into the opposite direction, you might feel like death the next day if you did 3 hours of visualization or prayer or meditation. Um, and recognizing the longer we do a practice, we might get a little bit longer of a bandwidth as well. So you just have to listen to your body, and you have to feel what feels right for you. And I know for me, my day-to-day life is, I tend to typically not like to push a visualization practice over 2 hours most days. And there is exceptions to that too. Like a month or two ago, my knee started feeling really sore, like walking and dancing on it, and I have a knee injury. And I was it was like kind of right before I was going to start this job, and I had the realization, well, I have this space in my life right now, and I know visualizations um, help my knee, and take some of the pain I feel in that knee injury away. And so what if I did like 3 hours of visualizations for like a week and a half, and then see how my knee feels? And so I did that. Um and my knee felt way better afterwards, and it feels stronger now than it did. It was super tender. It felt like, and it got way better by doing that. And so I think there is time for vipassana too, of like all day meditations, like either for a weekend or 7 days. You just have to set a time when you're going to come out of it. And sometimes those can be really helpful for realizations, or to give our body a little rest and recharge. um and so, right, there's a lot of exceptions, but we just want to be mindful of how much light we're consuming. And if we're always over consuming, if we're always doing like maybe 4 to 6 hours of some type of spiritual practice a day, right, we might be really pushing our limits, and we might actually find it harder to be a human. And we came here to be human. We didn't come here to be some god that other people worship, and it's actually your humanness that's actually going to make embracing that and mixing a little spiritual practice in with, or an hour or two of spiritual practice in with that, that is actually going to make you the most enlightened and help you grow the quickest than it is on overly obsessing on spirituality and ignoring your human life, or only focusing on your human life and never really leaning into spirit at all. And so when you're thinking about your growth, like, we want to grow in little ways. And if we're trying to grow too quickly, there might be a big come down, or we might find ourselves falling back into negative patterns. And it's okay if we do that. And we're not meant to be perfect, but it is something to just be a little bit more aware of. And can I work to grow in little ways? And maybe that still means we do 30 minutes to an hour of breath work, and we pray on the train for an hour, and we then channel for ourselves or listen to do some visualizations at night for an hour. If you have built up the endurance to be able to do that, by all means do it, and just listen to your body. And I kind of want to transition into start talking about humanness, because another thing I've kind of felt for this month is just like a little bit more darkness coming up. And for me, my darkness tends to be in pornography, and I've just been feeling a little bit more pornography cravings than I typically feel. And on my day to day, I don't typically feel them anymore. I'd say I'm pretty close to being on the back end of the pattern. And I just want to acknowledge, we might be at a different stage of the pattern of coming out of it. And so I wouldn't judge what I'm going to share as maybe I need to be better. You just might be at a different place and time, right? We don't want to say, oh, we don't want to look at ourselves and who maybe someone who's like a little bit further along on their healing journey and think I need to be right there tomorrow. We might, again, moving and growing slowly, and we might have just recently found our way out of pornography. And so wherever you're at, it's okay. But for me, I was feeling like a little bit stronger pornography cravings like last week. And then over the weekend, I was at a potluck. I stayed up till like 2 a.m. because I was trying to leave earlier, but I was having interesting conversations. And then um, on Sunday, like, I was tired, and then at some point I was like on social media, and I was looking at someone's post, and it definitely triggered it was like just a sexy sexy photo that I wasn't expecting to be sexy, or a sexy video that I wasn't expecting to be sexy, and it totally triggered my pornography cravings. And then I ended up spending like 20 minutes like, for me, like, I'm aware enough to know, like, I'm like to try and not feed pornography. So like when it gets triggered, like right where I'm at in my journey, kind of on the back end of really having any type of pull towards pornography, is like I'll look at, like, for 20 minutes I'll look at people stretching, like sexy stretches for like, or like sexy bikini photos, which for a lot of people probably wouldn't be a big deal, but like for me, I can recognize I'm feeding the part of me that gets a dopamine hit by looking at a more sexual image. And it definitely felt like, when I got triggered, kind of like a shark that had tasted blood. And for 20 minutes, I totally fell back into the pattern, totally fed it. And I'm sharing this, to show I'm human, right? I'm a human being. And while I focus a lot on healing, I'm still healing. I'm still on the journey just like anyone else. And for a lot of people, maybe they don't think that's a big deal, but it definitely felt like afterwards, my nervous system felt dysregulated. Like felt a little less confident when I then was like going to interact with others a little bit. And I noticed like when I was in a store the next day, like feeling a little bit of a stronger pull of like looking at women more sexually than I had felt maybe in the past couple of months. And so it definitely felt like it fed the pattern for me a little bit. And what I want to say is it's okay to fall into a pattern where it's not about being perfect. It's just about, okay, I'm going to try my best. And if I fall into the pattern, it's okay. And if I downward spiral and get totally lost into the pattern again, it's okay. I've done that too. That happened a couple years ago for me, but like I had gone like a couple years without really doing like using pornography at all, and then was over meditating, and it threw me right back into the pattern of looking at sexual images again. And I was aware enough to not really too much look at sexual videos, but it definitely, what you recognize is when you overconsume light, overconsume meditation, overconsume self-care, it's going to throw you into the negative of then the ways I avoid my life through what I perceive as positive experiences. If I do that too often, I get thrown in to avoiding life through my addictive patterns that I thought I had outgrown. And so I've, like a couple years ago, totally fell back into looking at sexual images for like a good 8 months. And so wherever we're at the healing journey, it's okay. And if we do fall into a pattern this month, and this definitely is a month where we're going to feel a little bit more clearing, we're going to feel a little bit more pull to past addictions. If we're feeling that and if we feed it, it's okay, but can we work to catch it, and instead of downward spiraling, doing our best to go, wow, I just fed that for 20 minutes, or I just fed that for an hour. I just totally fell back into using a substance I told myself I was letting go of. And can I take this as a moment not to be hard on myself, not to feel a bunch of guilt or shame for using the substance, but recognizing, can I take it as a moment of, wow, I need to love and care for myself more. And it's probably a good sign of, maybe the past couple of days I hadn't cared for myself more. Maybe I wasn't getting enough sleep, or maybe I was overworking myself, and with having me now a full-time job and also then doing YouTube stuff at night, it hasn't left a lot of time for me to do things I enjoy as much. And it has, I think, another reason why I've been feeling a little bit more cravings or pulls towards past addictions that I have outgrown. And recognizing that that whatever we're experiencing, can we use it as a reason to love ourselves more? And can we use it as, addiction is always fed from a lack of connection and also from a lack of self-care. And if I'm finding myself falling back into addictive patterns, right, probably a good time for me to express a little bit more joy that day, to do a little bit more self-care, and to make an effort to go connect with others a little bit more. And and really, your addictive patterns, uh, they were given to you by God, right? You grew up in a family that had certain ways of avoiding their emotions, that had certain ways of avoiding taking responsibility for their actions, whether that's words they might have said towards, like maybe we had parents that sometimes had edge in the voice, or weren't always the nicest to us, and or maybe, or had some way of using technology or substances, of avoiding or numbing or checking out how they felt. And we inherit that because our parents hadn't cleaned that up yet in their life. And as kids, oftentimes our addictive patterns, we didn't create, they came from someone we grew up with. And maybe for us that was more so our friends or whatever. But recognizing, okay, if I didn't create this pattern and this is merely an echo of past pain that I've fed for a while, and now it's woven a little bit more into my identity structure, I don't need to feel bad about feeling pulls. I don't need to feel bad of even sometimes slipping up and feeding this pattern. I just need to try my best to be different than the past. And and something I've said when I've been feeling really strong pulls and having a hard time, and I'm aware of it enough not to feed the pattern, but even if we find ourselves feeding the pattern, I'll say, like Archangel Michael, like the divine God, you like literally gave me this pattern, like get me through this. Like you like God literally birthed me into a family God that I am, God that we all are, and God that source that is aware of everything literally birthed us into families that had problems. And so if we have problems, right, not actually your fault. You just inherited the problems that the last generation didn't work through. And and so I'll literally say that prayer of, or like, I'm human too, and sometimes I fantasize about dating people or having sex with people who I know would not be good to do that with, who would not be a good partner, who would not be good to share that level of intimacy with. And I'm someone, coming from pornography, I've really seen how much a pattern it is of trying to find worth and see in other people choosing to have sex with us. And so I'm really not someone, it's a little Christian of me maybe, but it's like I really am not someone that does casual hookups. And I'm really not someone that would date anyone that I wouldn't imagine like long-term relation or like marrying. And so that means like I'm a little bit alone. Like it means it means that but it doesn't mean that I still don't think about that stuff. And it doesn't mean I still don't have fantasies about dating certain people or having sex with certain people. And when I feel strong pulls of that, that's a time where I'll use that of Archangel Michael, like, please hold me in integrity. Archangel Michael, like, I really don't want to form a romantic relationship with someone that's not right or out of balance. And so please help me see this person clearly. Please hold me in integrity, and please make sure that we both have healthy boundaries in this relationship. And I'll just say, sometimes I'll just say that for like hours as I'm like walking to the grocery store or going about my day, as a way of trying to hold me in light. And so ask for help and recognize that's not your fault for having pulls. It's not your fault for having cravings. It's not even your fault for slipping up, because I would say as humans, we all slip up. And sure, try and slip up as little as possible. But if we do, it's a time to give ourselves more love and care. It's a time to maybe look at, have I been overdoing my light practice that kind of threw me into this negative altered state a little bit. And it's a time to then think about, can I connect with others a little bit more? And for me, Luke, I tend to be a little bit more of like a canine. And I know for me, I tend to have a lot easier time. Uh, my nervous system is a lot more regulated when I spend more time with people, almost all of the time. And some people might more have like a feline, like or introverted alignment, where they might feel more regulated most of the time when they have more time alone. And I, as Luke, I still spend a lot of time alone, and sometimes it can be hard to find people to hang out with. And I definitely have felt that as well, as being someone who's sober, who's 28, and who really doesn't like to go to bars. Like, it's kind of hard to meet people that are your age that just want to hang out, and who aren't trying to date you, but would just like generally want to get to know you, or to like find, like, connect with people. Like, as friends, I think a lot of people, especially in their 20s, relate to all or nothing of, especially when relating to people we're attracted to, is of thinking of like, this person is either going to be everything to me, and they're going to be, and we're going to date and get married, or I'm going to stop talking to them again. And I'm a big believer in like the middle way of like, okay, can I form depth, vulnerability, and could I even, like, if it's someone I'm attracted to, could we even cuddle, or could we even dance sensually, but it just still be a friendship, right? And that's something I've been much more interested in exploring, is like, okay, can I form depth, vulnerability, love, connection, and even share physical touch with people while still holding it in the boundaries of friendship? And that's like a little bit of a perspective I feel like a lot of people don't have. And so if we spend a little bit more time alone, if we are a little bit more aligned of, I'm like, I only want to date someone if it's a long-term relationship, or I'm not really into casual hookups, or I don't like going to bars, and so then I have a hard time meeting people, right? I'm right there with you. Like, I also feel that. the theme I think for this talk is just like, okay, can we do little rhythms of growth rather than huge crashes? And can we work to be gentle with ourselves, no matter whether we slip up or fall down, because it's the gentleness that actually prevents the downward spiral a lot of the times. It's the gentleness that actually helps us pick ourselves up and do better next time. Is like when the child falls down and the mom comes and loves and cares and tells that child it's okay. It's that child, that's what's actually going to make the child do better the next time around. But when the child falls down, we berate that child and tell it it sucks, is when that child can never quite get it together. And we have to learn how to do that for ourselves. And I am someone who, for a long time, who could never quite get it together. And I've noticed in my life, like, I either have a tendency to be overly stagnant or then try and make up for overly stagnant by making drastic change or sprinting towards outcomes. And I think, like, thinking, bringing it back to like the tarantula of like, okay, can I just work towards what I want, but not expect it to come overnight? And if I'm hearing something like, I want to give up, I don't think it's going to happen. This is never going to work, right? Those are the parts of ourselves that are addicted to stagnancy and drastic change. That's where that voice is coming from. And if we give up, it's definitely not going to happen, right? I've heard a lot of successful people, like sometimes I watch motivational TikToks, and a lot of successful people talk about the difference between people that find success and the people that never find it is one group gave up. And if you just don't give up and continue to work at something, it could take a long time. And if we work at it efficiently and do it like every week, we're spending a good chunk of time working towards our goals, right? That goal will probably be achieved quicker in our life than if we just half ass it and do it like for an hour once a week. And, sometimes there's less space in our life, and sometimes we're working a 9 to 5. And so we also, it's okay wherever we're at. And you will, if you just continue to take steps forward, it's welcoming new opportunities into your life. And that's what I really think is so important, is can and so important, especially about this month of, can I move slowly, mindfully, and methodically? And can I allow myself to even start to slow down, address more of the areas of my life I might be neglecting to address? When something feels hard to do, maybe that's when I decide I have to do this, right? When it feels hard to clean my apartment, when it feels hard to pick up my instrument, when it feels hard to sit and do a visualization, that's when we maybe do that practice. And also listening to, okay, I'm listening to my body and I'm listening to balance. And there's one last one point, another point I want to hit is like, there's a teacher that I really adore that is incredibly psychic. And they were talking about, like, I was listening to this yesterday about doing like a 4-hour practice to regulate their nervous system. And I don't know what the practice was. I don't know what their past experience of trauma was like. But I get very hesitant when people start talking about extremes, because extremes lead to big highs and big crashes, and it usually leads to pitfalls. And people, like, the times when I've been sprinting towards outcomes is when I've like fallen and gotten a knee injury, or when I haven't been when I've been rushing and haven't been listening to my external environment enough is usually when bad things happen in my life. And when we're doing a 4-hour practice, right, whether that's a 4-hour meditation practice, and it can lead to imbalances, and it can lead to over stagnancy, and then I rush through the rest of my day. And so, I think when we're listening to people give advice about doing practices that are really long, like long duration, it's usually best to not to do less. It's usually best, right? Instead of doing a 4-hour self-care practice, right? Unless it's really gentle, or you probably could get away with like playing an instrument for 4 hours. But if it's something that alters your consciousness, whether that's prayer, whether that's kirtan, um, whether that's some type of spiritual experience, whatever it is, or spiritual practice, like there's a little less. Less is more. Less is more in finding balance in our life. And just because someone is really psychic and they're saying they did 4-hour practice, sometimes it can get a little muddy how much that actually serves people. And so I think, like, I just wanted, like, really hit home of, like, slow growth is fast growth. And if I just continue to push my envelope a little every day and continue to grow in the ways that are hard a little bit every day, and maybe if I have a tendency to do a 30-minute meditation practice, maybe I do another 10 minutes at night, or maybe I do 20 minutes of prayer while I'm walking, and maybe I just slowly work to push the envelope and I listen to my body. And when it starts to feel intense, I can lean into it a little. But if I'm leaning into it a lot every day, I'm forming a relationship with out of balance. I'm forming a relationship with altered states, and it's going to be more dysregulating for my nervous system than it is going to be helpful. And like, just like, use this example a lot, but just like eating blueberries, right? At some point, your body's just going to stop digesting the blueberries, and you're just going to be shitting them out. And it's a total waste of how many blueberries you ate. And if you actually found more balance in your life, when it would help you integrate the blueberries you're digesting, and it would be less of a waste of time, and you'd be forming more of a relationship with balance than overconsumption. And when you feed overconsumption, even if it's eating blueberries, it amplifies the pattern of overconsumption in all areas of your life. Um, and so it's really important to be mindful, and it's really important to listen to our body and not push our envelope to extremes every day. And I think that's where I want to leave this talk with. And I hope this was helpful. Thank you for listening. I love you all, and I'm so grateful for your time and attention. And you guys rock. And yeah, thanks for watching.